Hello, everybody. This is Bradley Grunner. I'm here with Arash Trabar, IFBB Pro, and Stu Yellen, WMBF Pro. And this is the Moss Macros podcast number 2. The first topic we're going to discuss today is the new classic physique division in the IFBB, which my friend Arash Trabar will be competing in soon. And I think this new division is a great idea because from what I understand, I have a limited understanding of what's going into this. From what I see and hear and observe and read, is that this is going to bring back more of the classic aesthetic physique, the tapered waist, the so-called V shape, the quad sweep, more detail. We've seen in the recent years the people that we refer to as freaks or behemoths. And when I was first observing bodybuilding, I was exposed as a young guy, even in, let's say I was, what we call preteens, and I was exposed to some of my uncle's magazines and books, and I saw the guy from the 70s and 80s, and he looked phenomenal. And I'm still a fan of that look. I still like the guys that are somewhat underrated even. I like, the looks of Hamdullah Ikulu, Rusty Jeffers, guys with that sort of shape. Even the physique competitor Sadiq Hadjovic, I like his physique as well. The nice tapered look, shredded, classic type of physique. For example, Frank Zane also. But Arash, now that you're going to go into this division, what do you think of this new division coming up? I think it's a great idea. I think that it's going to be a good addition to the IFBB. You got the shape for it. That's why you're going for it. You got the classic aesthetic physique. Obviously, you're in it. You must think highly of it. You're in it.
What's up, everyone? Yeah, I'm very excited about the division. I think we're blessed to have it. I have the utmost respect for men's open bodybuilding, and I love bodybuilding. Those guys are monsters and beasts, and they sell the tickets. That's everybody wants to come to the freak show and see those guys, but not everybody wants to be that size, and me including. I'm 5'10", so to really get looked at in men's open bodybuilding, to go pro and get looked at, at 5'10", what would I have to weigh? 250 plus? The guys up there my height are 250, 280. I think Big Ramy was like 3 and change this year. It's, it's bodybuilding. It's the same. It's the same sport, but it's just so different. A lot of guys don't want to be that big. They're not willing to do what it takes. And of course, when you're playing the size game, sometimes you give up the aesthetics. The top guys have both, and the idea is to have symmetry and aesthetics and nice lines and conditioning and mass. But I think some of the Arnold brought up the case of the sloppy guts, and a lot of people have been bringing that up, and I think that was one of the reasons that they made way for classic physique. I think it's a great idea. It's going to be, besides 212, there's no weigh-ins for men's open bodybuilding. So there's going to be weigh-ins. So everybody will compete against one another. But if you're 6 foot, you can weigh X amount. If I'm 5'10", I can weigh X amount. So we'll be on stage together, but there's a maximum weight for each of us. So I guess it keeps guys under control, so they're just not too big and too sloppy. Like you said, the guys I grew up, with the 90s bodybuilders, but even the mid to late 80s, I love that look. Those guys were a lot smaller, but a lot tighter, harder, and leaner, in my opinion, which is obviously easier to achieve and maintain when you're not 270, 280. So I'm very excited about it, and I'm very happy that they gave us this new division.
Stu, do you have any opinions on this new division?
Well, I think you never really want to sound like a hater. You see people arguing and explaining and all their feelings online. Every generation, the people at the top of the sport were thought to be freaks. You see some people, if they complain about the direction bodybuilding is going now, someone will point out, well, people thought Arnold was too big, and I get it. It's kind of hard to step outside, really, and objectively look at what the sport looks like when you're smack in the middle of it. Arash was saying, he's a big fan of the '90s, and look, that's when I got into this. I remember every article, magazine, anything that came out with Yates in it, I was like, oh my God, look at this guy. The muscle's just hanging off him. But I look back now at the look of the 90s, and as impressive as those guys were, it was very, very different look than the 80s. And you have to ask yourself, is the sport truly progressing, or is it just I guess one criteria that they're judged by taking precedence over everything else? I've been judging, obviously WNBF shows, a few other federations for the last few years. And that first judging round is symmetry, and as far as I know, that's supposed to be really, really important criteria. I know when, the judging sheets, the score sheets I look at, two guys are tied at the end of the pre-judging, you look at who had the better symmetry and they get the nod. That's supposed to be really, really important. Not, who has the most veins on the surface of their skin, who just, weighs the most. It's supposed to be, and look, I can't tell anyone what their individual definition of bodybuilding is, but you're supposed to be building something impressive. And I guess, as impressive as it can be to tip the scales at, 3 bills on stage, if it's an ugly package you don't want to look at, you got to step back and ask yourself about that. So, from that point of view, I think, look, personally, I think it's a great idea. The flip side, you're going to have people that are, I know I'm talking a lot, Brett.
No, I don't mind you going with it.
You're going to have people that are always going to say that, adding more divisions is a money grab, and, the addition of new divisions the last few years has really, I'll say, created growing pains, it used to be all about the bodybuilders. Then suddenly you got the bodybuilders who have really, really suffered to get to the stage, that morning. And these guys look like they're going to just die, just hanging on to get through the prejudging. And they got to sit through hours of bikini competitors who look like, and this is where people start to hate me, and we're going to get nasty fan mail, but
right.
I'm sorry, did not suffer the way a bodybuilder suffered, and
right.
I'm sure that'll blow back in my face, but is it a money grab? Is it, just to get more people involved in the sport? It's going to be both ways. Personally, I'd love to see where this goes. I think Arash is perfectly cut out for this, and, I'm sure me and Brad are going to be on the side waving our "Go Arash Go" sign. But,
exactly, yeah, of
course. I guess we'll see how it pans out the next couple of years.
Yeah, this one.
One more thing I just wanted to add. This is a very heavily. Usually, people are fans of bodybuilders that they want to look like, or that they have the similar genetics or similar look or whatever. So it's a very biased sport. I try to view it. I have some of my favorites, but I try to view who really looks the best. And at the end of the day, this is one thing that I always said. You can eat a lot and lift heavy and get big, and you can eat little and lift and diet down and get lean. I'm not impressed with either one. What's impressive is when you have some muscle maturity, some overall muscular development that's symmetrical and conditioned. So, that's where men's open bodybuilding is so impressive, because the guys are so big and so lean. That it's physique was great. I enjoyed doing it. It definitely grew a lot. When I was in physique, it wasn't like when it first started. When physique first started, I got to be honest, it didn't impress me at all. I mean, I'm not impressed with a 170, 180-pound guy with abs. I mean, that's very much achievable and obtainable, and I think that's why it was so popular. That's a great thing. It doesn't take anything away from it. The mainstream younger guys can look at that and be like, I can look like that. Nobody looks at Big Dorian Yates, Ronnie Coleman, or today Phil Heath and says, I can look like that. They have no clue what goes into that. They just look at that, their jaw drops, and then they move on, So for me, absolutely, I definitely feel like I feel like I could have kept doing well in men's physique, and I could have grown in that division, but I wanted to take it up a notch. I just, I've always wanted to look like the guys in the 80s and even the 90s, even though they started to get really big. So I want to push the envelope with my physique and see where I can take it. And, so I think, I'm very excited about that. I just want to add a little.
Okay. Arash, something you said there about just, I guess, how the division changed? And I mean, look, I'd love to hear your take on this. I mean, I obviously, I view the men's physique division, I guess from that of an outsider here. I have my own opinions again, but I want your take on this. How did it change? Because I know when there was even like the WNBF shows, or when like a new federation pops up, you always hear people talk about they have to populate the ranks, and I don't want to insult anyone here, but I would imagine that the criteria, the level of competitiveness, the quality, certainly changed over the years. It's still relatively new.
Yes, I wasn't competing or around when it first hit the scene, but when I look back now, it was, how did it change? It was a lot smaller. Guys got a lot bigger, a lot more muscular, and vascular, and just started looking like much, much smaller versions of bodybuilders. So I think what a lot of people ask me, what is men's physique? I don't get it. What is men's physique? How is it different? Men's physique, if I'm not mistaken, it's an obtainable look. It's a lifestyle look. It's a beach body look. This is what I do, and this is how I look all year round. It's not 16. You're not supposed to look like you had a 16-week, 12-week prep, and you're dehydrated and you carved up and you carved down. And that sunken look in the face of bodybuilders that shows they suffered. That's not what physique is supposed to be. You're not supposed to be super, super lean. You're not supposed to be super vascular. It's supposed to look like that's what you look all the time. And if you look at the guys in the beginning, I mean, absolutely. It was very obtainable, in my opinion, naturally. You just got to put in the work. And they didn't look crazy. But nowadays, I think it's less obtainable, and they got a lot bigger. My first show that I happened to do well, and I won the show, and I won overall, was the Atlantic States. And I was backstage, and I'm like, so many of these physique guys could take the shorts off and do better in bodybuilding than a lot of bodybuilders. A lot of the bodybuilders didn't look great. And I think that's just because physique became so much more popular. And I'm looking at these guys, and they were like too big or too vascular, too lean. There's a lot of guys that I have beaten, and a lot of guys that haven't placed well that look great. You might see them in the gym, or you might see them somewhere. You're like, oh my God, wow! Like backstage at the North Americans, when I walked back there, I was like, holy cow! There's a handful of guys out there that were bigger than me, probably harder than me, more conditioned, but they didn't. It was a bit too much. It wasn't that physique look. It was overwhelming. And the judges will just look past those guys immediately, and they will not reward them for being – they basically looked more like bodybuilders. I hope that answers the question.
No, dude, I think that's great. I know the first time I judged a show that had physique in it, and you have the criteria, everything's written down for you, and, you're trying to kind of wrap your head around this is the criteria, this is how they worded it. But what does that actually mean? Because, I think we all, grow up with the bodybuilder mentality, the symmetry, the size, the conditioning. And I remember one of the judges who had been doing this a very, very long time said to me, this is the guy you would put on a fitness magazine cover and more people would buy it.
Yes.
And I remember thinking that's a very good way to sum it up. It's achievable. It's hard work, but it's achievable. And I thought, again, I take that with me now when I judge shows. Like there's a physique, and I've marked down guys that are just like too shredded, and I've marked down guys that obviously came to compete in the bodybuilding division and quickly threw in a pair of board shorts, hoping to just get an extra trophy. So
there's guys that do both. It kind of makes me laugh. They allow you to do both, which is kind of funny. I think you should focus on one or the other. If you're going to do good in bodybuilding, then you should tank in physique and vice versa. So these guys doing both, planning on placing top 5. I mean, one thing I'd like to say without getting too deep, changing the subject, but about the judging, it all depends who shows up that day. So if everybody, even for a figure competitor, a figure competitor was talking to me the other day, and she said, "Oh, the judges told me this." I said, "Look, I respect the judges very much, and they're going to tell you something, but take everything with a grain of salt because they're telling you something in that one show compared to those girls you were on stage with. Plus, they're going to give you some feedback, and they're not necessarily going to remember it and stick out in their heads, 6 months later in another show. So if everyone comes in not so ripped, let's say, and then a figure girl or a physique guy comes in shredded to the bone, well, they're just going to look past them. But if everyone's ripped up and everyone's that's the norm, that's the standard, then you're going to place a little bit better. So it really does depend on who's there, who you're standing next to, who you're being compared to. You know, and a great example of that is social media. You see these pictures of these people 2 weeks out of the show. They look incredible. They look bananas. They're alone in their bathroom. Put them on stage next to somebody else with the same lighting, and then compare them, and then say something.
You know, I gotta say, and Brad, I'm sure we could do an entire show on like judging criteria. You know, maybe the future would be great. Yeah. You know, my God, I always get like, you know, I'll always wait around after a show. I'll always answer questions, get feedback. But then I get like the emails from people like the week or two after a show. And I remember this one girl, I forgot what she asked. And I explained to her, I said, you know, the judges have their criteria. And like Arash said, you don't know who's going to show up. And there's usually, and this is how I explained it to her, the one competitor that sets the curve. And you find yourself comparing everyone else to that one competitor who just, that's it. Like that girl or that guy, that there's perfect. There's the example. And you judge everyone else according to them. There was that one Olympia where Jay just came and diced. I think it was like 2009, you know, after he lost the title and he got it back. And I think that was the year Branch Warren took second. And a lot of people were like, how the heck could Branch Warren take second? And the rationalization, I forgot who pointed this out, but it was wonderful. It was, well, if Jay set the standard, then everyone gets compared to Jay. And Jay was so dense and so the most shredded he's ever been on stage in that show. Well, then by the same criteria, Branch was going to be second, no matter how much you either loved or hated his physique. And
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it sets the curve.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that even just by, I'm not a judge. I've just been a diehard fan for a long time. And could you say that even happened when, let's say, Dorian Yates came on the scene? Because I remember reading somewhere, I don't recall where even someone said, I think that Dorian recalled something that happened that he overheard from one of his competitors, even in his early days, saying that some guy decided he's going to hang up his posing trunks, and then someone asked him, why are you going to do that? And the guy said, because of fuckers like that. And he was referring to Dorian. I mean, that we have this guy who's surpassing so many people that you cannot keep up to. The judges will go to this person now. And it almost seems like that with the streak of Olympians. That Dan Duchesne one time said that once the judging criteria starts favoring someone, it's almost like that Olympia guy stays on that throne for years on end, despite what he looks like year after year, despite that he deteriorates a little bit for the next year. That this is just a go-to guy. It doesn't matter what he's lagging in, especially with Dorian. We're not here to rip on everybody because I'm a fan of Dorian. You know, even when he had, let's say, the somewhat degenerated bicep from his injury, and, you know, what was it, Nasser took second to him, and I don't think that should have been done, but it just seems
we'll argue about that later.
I love Dorian. I love Nasser also. I was pretty upset. I'm laughing now. I grew up looking up to these men as if they were superheroes, and I was deeply kind of affected. I mean, the first time I actually felt affected by a stranger passing away was Nasser, because there's this guy who I've been looking up to since I'm basically like, let's say, a kid, basically, and, you know, that's just a side tangent. That's nothing to laugh about, but I'm just saying that these are the guys who I looked up to, and it just seemed like that was a standard. That was a guy that we judged people by. It was Dorian. You know, he was the guy who made this huge jump in body weight, in lean body mass from 92 to 93, I think it was.
93, yeah, that 93 Olympia.
93, put on all this mass. People say that he just died. He said that he just died a little wiser. I don't know how you would get 20 to 30 pounds of LBM, but just by dieting a little wiser.
A little creatine.
Yeah, I don't know how that.
No, but dude, Sean Ray was always pointing that out. It's like Dorian took such a jump that he became almost, you know, he was a legend. It's like the line out of Batman, you know, you become something more, Mr. Yates.
Yes.
You know?
Well, Dorian was somewhat first of his kind.
Yes.
So he began the era of the mass monsters,
yes.
that freaky size, and Nasser was right behind him as well. So I think it's not that, he sets a standard and that's it. He's sitting on his throne and he's going to win because he's Mr. Olympia no matter what. There's been a lot of upsets and a lot of times where people, just like you said, you believe Nasser deserved to win. That's happened. Unfortunately, that's a different topic.
Yes.
I think that the guy that said, fuck it, and hang up his shorts, I think that guy doesn't belong in the sport and he's a quitter. Because what you do is you train your ass off and you work hard. And if you're not even qualifying for then forget it. Yeah, there's no comparison. But if you're up there and you have that opportunity, you keep bringing in amazing packages and you wait until the champ comes in a little bit off. I mean, you look at Dexter, man. Dexter has been, keeping his mouth shut and busting his ass for 20 years, Dexter Jackson. And he always comes in on. So if anybody slips up, if anybody's a little off, a little soft, a little bloated, Dexter is right there. And look, the guy at, 46? Dexter Jackson?
Oh, I don't know.
He's in his
I heard he's 200 at this point.
20, yeah.
Keeps getting better.
20, after 20 years of competing, he's done more Olympias than anybody. He was 2008 Mr. Olympia. The guy placed second at the Olympia this past year. I mean,
he just keeps getting better.
He just keeps getting better. And nobody was thinking that Dexter was going to place second. They had, other people in mind, but the guys came in off and he took advantage.
Dude, I still remember, I've still got some old Flex magazines, and I remember they had a profile of Dexter Jackson, who's a bantamweight competitor. And I remember he wasn't the Blade, you guys may remember this, Brad, I know you used to read all this old crap. He was the Jaguar.
Yes.
Right? They used to do, I don't know, I don't even know if he was a pro back then. They would just profile these up-and-coming amateurs. And I mean, he was so tiny. I mean, I don't think he was even lightweight, bantamweight, whatever he was.
I remember the whole history.
Goodness, man. It's amazing. You see, if you keep the old magazines like we do, you're scrolling back through them, you're like, oh my God, there's Jay Cutler at 16, bigger than I ever was.
Because I remember in, let's say, 95 or 94 when Ronnie Coleman, what was he? I don't even remember. He was just another body. Not another bodybuilder. He was a pro, but I remember my friend Steve and I were looking at him. We knew him as a bodybuilder, but then years later, he pops up as Mr. Olympia. That was quite.
Well, dude, he was one of the, I don't know how many guys, was it tying for 16th place at the Olympia?
Exactly. I remember that.
Because if you guys listening, if you don't know, they don't place you after 15th place.
Yeah, 16.
Yeah, you'll have 20 guys that all tied for 16th place.
Yeah, because go ahead.
You know what I really believe in the 90s, since we're talking about the 90s, just to say, I believe that the 90s, guys will talk about drug use, the way they trained. I definitely agree with all those things. Guys ate different back then. They trained harder, in my opinion. But I think the 90s was riddled with probably the most genetically gifted pros that ever lived, all in the same time. There was a time when Ronnie and Kevin and Sean and Flex and all these guys were on stage together. And it was remarkable. And I think any of those guys, when Kevin went pro in the Nationals in the early 90s, no one looked bad on stage.
Mm-hmm.
If you take any of those guys and you bring them on stage today in the NPC, they will wax the floor with anybody out there. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude or step on anyone's toes, but it was another level of conditioning and symmetry back then.
Yes, but Stu, we've talked about this a lot of times, and even me, if anybody knows who I am, I do post on a certain internet forum that I particularly like, actually, and I brought this topic up a few times. I even brought up the topic of 90s bodybuilding before, and I actually linked some YouTube clips of what I refer to as the golden era of bodybuilding. To me, it was the 90s. We had guys like Mike Francois, Phil Hernon, who won a pro card, but I think that he stopped competing. We had Craig Titus, Nasser El Sambadi, Aaron Madron, Bruce Patterson, Vince Taylor, Chris Cormier. We had Ian Harrison. Remember him?
Yeah.
Who's the other guy?
Remember Charles Claremont?
I was gonna mention Claremont.
One of my favorites.
He is amazing.
Very underrated.
Yes.
Amazingly thick. People don't remember how big he was because
shredded.
he had very
shredded.
symmetrical, very he kept a tiny waist. He was compared to those guys, just.
Because I was at actually the either my first New York Pro that I actually attended, the first bodybuilding show I ever saw was a New York Pro, and I believe that it was either 99 or 2000 actually, and I think that was the year that Paul DeLay won the NOC, and I was blown away. And then I actually saw an NOC Night of Champions. It was Night of Champions back then. I think I saw Night of Champions with Marcus Rule, and the New York crowd went absolutely batshit freaking crazy for this mass monster freak. But what I saw back then in Night of Champions, again, I'm not ripping on it. I am not an IFBB pro. I mean, I'm just a fan. I'm looking at it from an outsider. I'm not going to be an IFBB pro. However, I am in agreement with my friends here is that I just see a difference in the physique back then. Even the mass monsters back then had this sleek, waspy kind of frame. I just, to me, again, I'm not ripping on the sport that I love. What do you call it, a sport or endeavor? I watch it all the time. I'm always watching Olympias. I always want to go to a show. I want to go to the next New York Pro. I'm from New York. I go to the Hercules regularly for the IMBF shows. However, is that I've noticed the difference, and to me, there's a ceiling to what even a genetically person can build naturally. Like the genetically gifted person can, let's say, build anywhere from, let's say, 30 to 50 pounds of muscle on your frame. After a while past that, muscle building is just simply a matter of, to me, indeed, wise training, wise nutrition, but the thing that's going to make the difference at this point is the drug use. And if we keep on seeing...
Here comes the hate mail.
Exactly, here's the hate mail, but I'm sorry. After, a certain amount of years training naturally, you build a 40 pounds of muscle, which people in internet land think is nothing but a chicken wing. Sorry to say that actually that's what people could build naturally, and the genetically elite are going to build that. Even 30 pounds of muscle will make you look like a different person, but we're talking about competitive bodybuilding here. And after a certain while, I'm sorry, these fancy training routines, maybe they give someone an edge in stimuli that they never had before, but at that point, what we're seeing here from year after year after year is a matter of increasing drug dosage, I believe, because where else is this muscle mass coming from? And to me, bodybuilding has always been part of the drugs have been part of bodybuilding the whole time, but it's like when you see an endeavor that's just going this drug-aided route, more drugs, to me it kind of like puts a sour twist on it. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think that, look, everything it grows. There's an evolution in everything. Nobody goes to a UFC fight to see a decision. Everybody wants to see a knockout. Nobody goes to a car show to look at a Ford Fiesta. Sorry for all you Ford Fiesta drivers out there. But they want to see the yellow Lamborghini, the purple McLaren with the scissors, crazy doors. And so the same thing with bodybuilding, that they want to see the freaks. Like you said, at the Night of Champions, when Rule came out, no one even really knew him in America. The whole New York crowd was chanting his name, Rule, Rule, Rule. He was enormous. He was just huge, hard. And it was a new era of these freaks. And so the people loved them. The judges awarded them. So everybody else follows everybody else. Whatever they ate more, they trained harder, they took more drugs, whatever people out there want to say, mainly the drugs, but they got bigger and bigger. And then the whole division gets bigger. So now when everyone's getting bigger, not everybody's going to stay streamlined. Not everybody's going to be able to hold it well. You're going to have a lot of sloppy guys. And even in the Olympia the past few years now, instead of, better every year, you look at the top 10 in the Olympia this year, and there was a handful of guys that were holding water in their backs, and so you can't, you're going to give up a little bit in possibly the symmetry department. You're going to give up a little bit in the conditioning department when you're pushing the envelope so far with size and mass. Now people, well, look at this guy. Oh, well, look at that guy. No, there's some guys that can pull it off. Phil looks great. I think Dexter looks phenomenal. But Dexter's really not that big. He's not a mass monster. At the end of the day, the more muscle you have on your frame means the more you're eating to grow and maintain, and the more you're eating, the harder it is to come in conditioned. Were guys more conditioned in the past? I believe so. And it's also a different look. When your muscle holds water, so when you have this huge, big, round muscles, you're going to have a softer look. I remember looking at Ronnie in his peak when he was just a monster and thinking, my brain knows this guy's like 4% or less. He's sub 4% body fat, but he looks fat. His muscles were so big and so full of glycogen, and literally his lats would hang. He would look like an obese person. It was insane,
Well, he wore outfits that looked like, the drapes, tablecloths. I mean, it's like how do you clothe a guy that size?
well, 90s bodybuilding clothing. Well, it was 2000, but
Oh,
90s.
Brad, come on. You still got your hot skins in the closet, right?
I still want to see the Lee Priest. I want to see Lee Priest and Sean Ray training on that ESPN show with
That was a great show,
with
man.
Boyer Coe with the one piece
Right.
leotard with a stripe of one piece
Were they
leotard.
the matching? Because I think it was Kevin Levrone and somebody. Was it Kevin Levrone and Sean Ray or something? They were matching leotards.
Yeah, I think it was just different color, but the same outfit.
You know,
right?
dude, at least, I mean, look, I remember training at it was an old powerhouse in Carl Place. I remember a guy coming in. He was wearing one of those, this striped singlets and, going the train. And the guy was, like, insane looking. He was big. He was cut. And my brother elbows me. He goes, how come we don't train in that? I'm like, if we looked like him, we could pull that off,
Yeah, I guess when you are.
So I think this brings us on to our next topic: guys wearing spandex nowadays. What's going on?
Right? There's a whole show on that.
I personally like my underarm. I'm a little, but I wear my shorts over my spandex. I actually do wear my Under Armour tights under my shorts, but I don't know if I'm going to be going into the gym. The one time I actually went on my tights only then because I think I forgot my shorts and my training partner said, "Look, don't talk to me."
Yeah, I think that was me that day. All right,
No,
so
you just said
what's our next topic? So
well, we have we could just touch upon one more little thing that I wasn't planning on discussing tonight, but I think that we could discuss it, let's say, for a few minutes before we wrap this episode up, is that my thing is this, though, is that, I'm pretty much, I guess people who know me, I try to be this level-headed person. I weigh risks and consequences, even if someone else is acting a little risky. I don't judge them negatively, but being that I am such a fan of bodybuilding, with this chase in size, I mean, and this could be a whole conversation in itself. With this chasing of size, we have seen more and more guys get sick and suffer the consequences of this chasing of mass. And despite what anybody in internet land thinks, this is just not a matter of some type of genetic defect that's only unique to bodybuilders that makes bodybuilders drop dead in their 20s to 40s.
Well, Brett, don't forget, every time someone dies, and then I'm not wishing ill on anyone, there's always he had a genetic predisposition for this. And I got to say, the widespread, just the probability that so many people that pursue bodybuilding, performance-enhancing drug-aided bodybuilding, magically have this predisposition. I mean, it's just a freak occurrence, I suppose.
Listen, I think if you're bodybuilding and taking drugs and you think that nothing's going to happen to you, then you're just ignorant. I think anybody out there that's on drugs currently or thinking of doing drugs, do your homework. Read as much as you can. Get a decent doctor on board. Do everything as smart and wise as you can, and just understand the consequences. I used to race bikes, and people would crash and break a bone or cut them up, and they'd be, I'm never riding again. Well, you shouldn't have ridden in the first place because you knew that was a possibility. Why would you even take the risk if you're not willing? Risk versus reward, and bodybuilding even naturally there's injuries and your heart will grow. Being a large person, forget steroids and bodybuilding, causes a lot of health issues and early death as well. So, most of the bodybuilders that we see that die young with heart problems, they're just very, very heavy. They're very big guys. That we know for a fact, right? If you look back at the 70s and 80s, a lot of the bodybuilders, and take a look at them today, a lot of them are alive. Arnold's alive. Lou Ferrigno's alive. Franco Palumbo's alive. Frank Zane's alive. Look at a lot of the guys that we're talking about in the 90s. A lot of them are not alive, and the ones that are have a lot of health issues. Just, being a certain size for so many years is taxing on the body, even without drugs. And then when you throw drugs into the mix, of course there's going to be issues. Just don't be ignorant, How much does this mean to you? How far are you willing to take it? Just do everything accordingly, knowing the consequences. Don't be in the dark, do your research and definitely get the advice of a doctor, get yourself checked out every once in a while and do things properly. Come off your cycles. I see guys that just stay on all the time. because they just don't want to get small. And you gotta, there's bodybuilding and then there's lifting and juicing for the ego. These are two completely different things. Bodybuilding is an art. Taking up space and wearing triple XL sweaters is not an art. So if you're insecure and, someone told you you're not tough or made fun of you when you're a kid, get over it.
Yeah.
Get over it, because eating a ton and taking a lot of drugs and just being really puffy and big in the gym is not going to make you feel any better. You're just screwing up your health and you don't even look that great. Bodybuilding is an art, and that's it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you brought up a good side topic, actually. There's a competitive side of bodybuilding, and there's guys who just want to keep getting bigger and bigger. And how am I going to say this without naming a name, so to speak? Because the guy that I'm talking about, I like, actually. But there's a guy with a YouTube series now, and he's doing this journey, kind of like a reality TV style journey of how he's growing by the day. And I even told someone recently, I don't understand the point of this after a while. There's a certain point after 300 pounds. I mean, what does someone want to do? Be as big as a fucking brownstone? Like, what the fuck is this going to do for you? Like, what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't know. I'm not going down that route. I love bodybuilding. Right now I'm doing it because I freaking love it as a passion. I really want to fit one show in before I have a kid and have to so-called grow up, because I've been procrastinating on that personal goal forever. But I just want to see what I can do with my body, do a natural show. I love it. But, I guess to each their own. Some guys want to take this the totally risky route. They got to weigh out their risks and rewards. I weigh out my own risk. I mean, not a risk per se, but I weigh out the drudgery of a contest prep and how it will affect those around me. So that's some food for thought, and I hope you enjoyed this show today. And we're going to wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed it. Mas Macros podcast number 2, and we'll catch you next time.